Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we are going deep into the world of material science. Imagine getting to understand the stuff that makes up, well, everything from the chair you're sitting on to the screen you're looking at.
It's true, most people don't realize how much material science impacts their daily lives.
We've got a ton of research here, and our mission is to break it all down into something you can actually use. We're talking definitions, real-world examples, and even a peek into the future of materials. First up, what even is material science and engineering?
Well, our source defines it as the study of the relationships between a material's structure and its properties.
Okay, but that's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
like saying baking is just about combining ingredients. What's missing is the why, the delicious cake at the end.
Exactly. The cake here is understanding how to design materials for specific purposes, and that's where the engineering part comes in. It's about using scientific knowledge to create something useful.
So a material scientist might investigate why a certain metal bends without breaking. And a material engineer uses that knowledge to design a safer car chassis.
Precisely. And what's fascinating is that most people in the field actually do both research and engineering.
Okay, that makes sense. But before we can even talk about designing materials, we need to understand how they're structured. And our source goes deep talking about everything from the subatomic level to the macroscopic. To be honest, I got a little lost in the subatomic realm.
Think of it like zooming in and out with a superpowered microscope. Subatomic is the smallest level where we're looking at electrons and how they interact with the nucleus.
So like the very core of an atom.
Exactly. Then we zoom out a bit to the atomic level where we see how the atoms are arranged relative to each other. Are they packed close together? Is there a specific pattern?
Okay, I'm starting to see the picture. And then we keep zooming out to the microscopic level where we can actually see groups of atoms clustered together.
Right. And finally, we reach the macroscopic level, which is what we see with the naked eye.
Got it. But it's not just about how these tiny particles are arranged, right? There's also the concept of properties.
Absolutely. Properties describe how a material reacts to different stimuli like heat, force, or light. Think about a rubber band. Its ability to stretch and snap back is a mechanical property.
And those properties can change depending on the material structure, right? Like a metal spoon won't stretch and snap back the way a rubber band does.
Exactly. And this is where the relationship between processing, structure, properties, and performance becomes crucial. The way a material is processed actually impacts its structure, which in turn affects its properties and ultimately how it performs.
Okay, our source has a great example of this with those aluminum oxide discs. They show 3 discs, one transparent, one translucent, and one opaque. They're all made of the same material but processed differently.
That's a perfect illustration. The transparent disk is a single crystal, meaning its atoms are arranged in a very ordered way, allowing light to pass through unimpeded. The translucent disk has many tiny crystals, and the boundaries between them scatter some light. And the opaque disk has those tiny crystals plus pores, which block the light completely.
So same material, different processing, different properties, different uses.
Precisely. And understanding this relationship is key to designing materials for specific purposes.
Now, if I'm designing something like a new type of phone, I can't just randomly pick a material, right?
Definitely not. There are 3 key things to consider: in-service conditions, deterioration, and cost.
Okay, so in-service conditions, that means thinking about where and how the material will be used. Like a phone case needs to be durable enough to withstand rocks and scratches.
Exactly. And deterioration refers to how the material might change over time. Will it rust? Will it become brittle?
And of course, cost is always a factor. You can't build a rocket ship out of solid gold, no matter how cool that would be.
Probably not the most practical choice.
Okay, so we've got all these different materials with different properties. How do scientists even begin to make sense of it all?
That's where material classification comes in. Broadly speaking, we can group materials into 4 main categories: metals, ceramics, polymers, and composites. Think of it like organizing your bookshelves. You might group them by genre, author, or even color.
Okay, so let's play a quick game. Our source has some examples of everyday objects. I'll describe the object, and you tell me what category it belongs to. Ready?
Bring it on.
First up, a shiny, bendable paperclip. What do you think?
That's gotta be a metal. They're typically strong, ductile, and good conductors of heat and electricity.
You got it. Now, how about a delicate, transparent drinking glass?
That sounds like a ceramic. They're often hard and brittle, but also resistant to high temperatures.
Correct again. Last one, a flexible, lightweight water bottle.
That's a classic polymer. They're known for being versatile, lightweight, and often good insulators.
Perfect. You aced the material quiz. But we're missing one category. Composites.
Right. Composites are combinations of two or more different materials designed to take advantage of the best properties of each. Think fiberglass, which combines the strength of glass fibers with the flexibility of a polymer resin.
So it's like creating a superhero material by combining different powers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, before we jump into the really cool stuff, advanced materials, let's take a closer look at a real-world example that might surprise you.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What is it?
The humble soda bottle.
Wait, what's so special about a soda bottle? I just drink from it and toss it in the recycling bin.
But think about the requirements for a good soda bottle material. It needs to hold pressurized carbon dioxide, be non-toxic, strong enough to withstand drops, and affordable to produce.
Okay, I haven't really thought about it that way. There's actually a lot going on behind the scenes.
Right. We could use aluminum, which is an excellent barrier to CO2, but those cans can be expensive. Glass is also a great barrier and can be recycled multiple times, but it's heavy and breakable. And then there's plastic.
Which is lightweight and cheap, but doesn't hold the fizz as well.
Yeah.
I've definitely experienced my fair share of flat sodas.
Exactly. So even something as seemingly simple as a soda bottle involves complex material considerations. It's a great example of how material science impacts our daily lives in ways we often don't even realize.
This is making me rethink my entire recycling bin. But speaking of choices, I'm really curious about these advanced materials you mentioned. What makes them so special?
Advanced materials are like the superheroes of the material world. They are designed for high-tech applications, often with enhanced properties or entirely new capabilities.
Okay, that sounds pretty cool. But what kind of high tech are we talking about here? Give me some examples.
Think electronics, aerospace, medicine, even renewable energy. We are talking materials that push the boundaries of what's possible, and they often come with a hefty price tag.
Makes sense, you get what you pay for. So what are the main types of advanced materials we will be exploring?
Our research dives into four main categories: semiconductors, biomaterials, smart materials, and nanomaterials.
Ooh, I am already intrigued. Let's start with semiconductors. I know they are crucial for electronics, but I have always been a little fuzzy on how they actually work.
Semiconductors are fascinating because their ability to conduct electricity falls somewhere between a conductor like copper and an insulator like rubber. And what's really cool is that we can actually control their conductivity.
Wait, how do you control something like conductivity?
It all comes down to their electronic structure and a concept called the band gap. Imagine electrons in a material like people on a staircase.
Okay, I am picturing tiny people climbing tiny stairs inside a material.
Perfect. The band gap is like a missing step on that staircase. In a conductor, there is no band gap, so electrons can flow freely. In an insulator, the band gap is huge, so electrons can't easily jump across it.
So semiconductors have a band gap, but it's not too big, not too small, just right.
Exactly. This Goldilocks band gap allows us to control the flow of electrons. And here's the really cool part. By adding tiny amounts of impurities, a process called doping, we can manipulate the band gap and therefore the conductivity.
So it's like adding a pinch of salt to a recipe to enhance the flavor. Except here, we're enhancing the conductivity.
That's a great analogy. And by carefully controlling the type and amount of impurities, we can create different types of semiconductors, which are used to build all sorts of electronic components.
So this is how we get those tiny, powerful chips that run our computers and smartphones.
Exactly. It's all thanks to our ability to manipulate the properties of semiconductors at the atomic level. Pretty mind-blowing, right?
It is. Okay, next up, biomaterials. This one always fascinates me. The idea of using materials to replace or repair parts of the human body seems straight out of science fiction.
It's an incredible field that's constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible. But biomaterials face some unique challenges. They need to be compatible with living tissue, meaning they won't cause harmful reactions or be rejected by the body.
So it's not just about finding a material that's strong and durable, but also one that the body will accept.
Exactly. Biocompatibility is crucial. The material needs to be non-toxic, non-allergenic, and ideally it should integrate seamlessly with the surrounding tissue.
That's a pretty tall order. What kind of materials can actually meet those requirements?
It's a diverse field. We have metals like titanium, which is strong and lightweight, ceramics like alumina, which is wear-resistant, polymers like silicone, which is flexible and biocompatible, and even composites that combine the best properties of different materials.
So choosing the right biomaterial depends on the specific application.
Absolutely. For a hip replacement, you need a material that's incredibly durable and wear-resistant for the ball and socket joint. But you might use a more porous material for the stem that anchors the implant into the bone, allowing bone to grow into it.
That's amazing. It's like designing a material that works with the body, not just replacing a part.
Exactly. And as we learn more about the complex interactions between materials and living tissue, we can design even more sophisticated biomaterials that promote healing and improve people's lives.
Okay, I am ready for the really fun stuff. Smart materials. These are the ones that can actually sense and respond to their environment, right? It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It does, doesn't it? But it's becoming more and more real. Remember those noise-canceling headphones we talked about earlier? They use piezoelectric materials, which generate an electrical charge in response to pressure.
So when sound waves hit the headphones, the piezoelectric material senses the vibrations and creates a signal that cancels out the noise.
Exactly. It's like having a tiny sound engineer inside your headphones, constantly adjusting the audio to create a perfect listening experience.
That's incredible. What other kinds of smart materials are out there?
Another fascinating group is shape memory alloys. These metals have the amazing ability to remember their original shape and return to it when heated.
Wait, you can bend or deform them? They'll just spring back to their original shape when you warm them up. That's wild.
It is. This property makes them ideal for applications like stents that can be inserted into a blood vessel in a compressed form and then expand to open up the vessel.
Wow. So are smart materials only used in these high-tech medical applications?
Not at all. They're finding their way into everyday products as well. Think self-tinting eyeglasses that darken in sunlight or clothing that adjusts its breathability based on temperature and humidity.
It's like giving materials a sense of awareness. The possibilities seem endless.
And that's just the beginning. As we continue to explore smart materials, we can imagine a future where materials seamlessly integrate with our lives, responding to our needs and enhancing our experiences in countless ways.
Okay, I'm ready for the grand finale, nanomaterials. It's mind-blowing to think about manipulating matter at the atomic level. I have to admit, it's a concept that's always been a bit difficult for me to grasp.
It is pretty remarkable when you think about it. Remember, nanomaterials are defined by their size.
Right.
At least one dimension must be less than 100 nanometers.
Which is, like, incredibly tiny. But why does size matter so much at that scale? Why do nanomaterials behave differently than the same material in bulk?
It all comes down to surface area. At the nanoscale, a much larger proportion of atoms are on the surface of the material compared to a bulk material.
Okay, I think I get that. But why does that change the material's properties?
Well, because those surface atoms tend to be more reactive, they are exposed and ready to interact with their surroundings.
So in a nanomaterial, you have way more of these reactive atoms, which leads to different properties.
Exactly. And this is why nanomaterials can do some pretty remarkable things. Take gold, for example. In its bulk form, it's shiny, yellow, and a great conductor of electricity. But gold nanoparticles can actually appear red or purple and have different catalytic properties.
Whoa, so the same material can act completely differently just because of its size. That's wild.
It is. And this unique behavior gives us a whole new toolbox for designing materials with specific properties.
This is blowing my mind. Okay, so we have these tiny particles with amazing properties. How do scientists even make these nanomaterials?
Remember those top-down and bottom-up approaches we discussed earlier?
Right. Top down is like taking a sledgehammer to a block of material and chiseling it down to the nanoscale, while bottom up is like carefully placing each atom one by one.
Exactly. And both approaches are used to create all sorts of nanomaterials with unique properties.
So can you give me some specific examples? What are some of the cool things we could do with nanomaterials?
Well, carbon nanotubes are incredibly strong and lightweight, making them perfect for reinforcing composite materials used in everything from airplanes to tennis rackets.
So you could create materials that are stronger than steel but as light as a feather.
Precisely. And nanoparticles are being used in everything from sunscreens that block harmful UV rays more effectively to drug delivery systems that can target specific cells in the body.
It sounds like nanomaterials have the potential to change the world. But I have to ask, are there any risks involved in working with these tiny particles?
That's a very important question. Because nanomaterials are so small and reactive, there are concerns about their potential impact on human health and the environment. It's an area of ongoing research, and we need to be cautious.
So it's like having a powerful new tool. We need to make sure we use it responsibly.
Exactly. It's all about finding a balance between the potential benefits and the potential risks. But with careful research and development, Nanomaterials have the potential to help us solve some of the world's biggest challenges.
Well, this has been an absolutely incredible journey through the world of material science. We started with the basics, learned about those fundamental relationships between processing, structure, properties, and performance, and even took a peek into that mind-blowing world of advanced materials.
And this is really just the beginning. The field is constantly evolving with new discoveries and innovations happening all the time. It's a truly exciting time to be following the world of materials.
I couldn't agree more. It's amazing to think how these tiny building blocks of matter can have such a huge impact on every aspect of our lives. From the clothes we wear, the energy we use, to the technologies that connect us, it's all thanks to material science. So keep that curiosity burning and never stop learning.